As the presidential primary and caucus season is about to start, the war between Israel and Hamas is threatening to upend American political coalitions. And the voting starts soon. The first presidential caucus in Iowa is just a month away. Early voting for Minnesota's primary starts January 19th.
Now, this is Talking Points on CBS News Minnesota.
Good evening and welcome to Talking Points. Tonight we'll explore how the war between Israel and Hamas is tearing American voters apart. Minnesota Muslim leaders are amongst those leading an abandoned Biden movement nationwide. Why does this matter? Well, a CBS News poll found Muslim groups are not alone, that support for the president's handling of the war has dropped from 44% to just 39% in 2 months. And polls show every vote will matter next November. In an average of all recent polls, former President Trump sits just 2 points ahead of President Biden. But local Jewish groups say feelings in the Jewish community have never been higher for support for Israel, and that will translate into votes. Tonight we'll visit with a local Muslim activist and a Jewish community leader about the political fallout from the war. We'll get perspectives from both a Republican and Democratic analyst. But let's start with Professor Larry Jacobs, professor at the U of M's Humphrey School, who sees the war as a force ripping apart the Democratic Party. And joining us right now is Professor Larry Jacobs. What do you think about the impact of the Israeli-Hamas war? Is that going to have a big political impact on the 2024 elections?
It's more bad news for Joe Biden, whose approval ratings are already terrible. And now what we're seeing is that the Israel-Hamas war is splitting the Democratic Party. We've seen a lot of polls showing that Joe Biden is not doing well against Donald Trump and some of the other Republicans, and that is among independents and others. What is happening with the Israel-Hamas war is it is drawing away voters who would normally vote for the Democratic Party. So women, people of color, youth hate the war. It's just more and more bad news for Joe Biden.
In terms of going forward, is it people, there are Palestinian groups, including some locally here in Minnesota, that are organizing with other states to, quote, dump Biden. Is the issue, and when you ask them, most of them say, well, we won't vote for Donald Trump if he's the Republican nominee, but is the issue of them voting for the opponent, or is the issue also them sitting at home and not voting?
I think the biggest challenge for Joe Biden among those who normally vote for the Democrats is just they are dispirited, they are disengaged, they are likely not to turn out for Joe Biden at this moment. So, Joe Biden has just got an incredible mountain to climb, and it's getting worse and worse. And the divisions that are developing within the Democratic Party that may really set back efforts to turn out voters appear to be getting much worse, particularly in wake of the Israel-Hamas war.
The administration, though, really is doubling down on its Israeli policy. Just last week, it was the veto in the Security Council. Great Britain actually abstained, did not vote. Does the administration have to figure out some way to change course? Because it looks like Joe Biden is pretty steadfast in what his support is for Israel and their positions and how they're handling this.
Joe Biden is stuck in a tough spot. If he decides to begin to pull back U.S. support for Israel, he's going to alienate Jews who've often voted for the Democratic Party. He's going to send a signal of weakness and indecisiveness that could hurt him among other sets of voters. The only course here for Joe Biden is for the war between Israel and Hamas to end as soon as possible, and for there to be some time for healing, and then, of course, for the Republicans to choose a candidate who Joe Biden can run against as a better alternative.
All right, Professor Larry Jacobs, thank you so much for your insights. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
Up next, hear from a local Muslim activist leading a nationwide effort to get Democratic voters to abandon the president, and a local Jewish leader who says Jews in our community have never been more committed to Israel. Well, joining us right now is Jaylani Hussein, who is a board member of the National Abandon Biden Movement. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
And before we get started, I want to make sure I know a lot of people know you as Jaylani Hussein, the executive director of CARE. That is not the role that you are speaking from right now. Can you explain?
No, absolutely not. Our organization is a 501c3 organization, so CARE Minnesota is not involved in the Abandoned Biden efforts. I'm doing this as a community leader and someone who part
What
of this.
is the basic problem with President Biden's position here? This is a party, the Democratic Party, that most Muslims, most people see as more supportive of Muslim rights and concerns.
That's true. And that's why majority of the Muslims and in Minnesota, we don't have an accurate number, but our projections project that close to maybe 85 to 90% of the Muslims in Minnesota are usually voting to support Democrats across the state. Now, there are sometimes some Muslims who are voting predominantly for Democrats, but may vote for example, Congressman Emmer in St. Cloud. But and the interesting thing is that Muslims were significant for securing Biden the 2020 election. Obviously, President Trump was a president that used Islamophobia as part of his election process and then governed with policies like the Muslim ban. And so many Muslims voted for Biden. And the war in Gaza has reached a level where it is now embarrassing, not just to Muslims, but embarrassing to our nation. The fundamental principles that many of us support within the Democratic Party to the United States. All the polls show right now the majority of Americans, Democrats, much, much more supportive of a ceasefire, and even Republicans, over majority of Republicans supporting a ceasefire. Yet our president and Congress is acting outside the frame of the constituents who voted for them.
Well, let me ask you, because the polls right now, you know them, you've seen them. It does look like former President Trump will be the Republican nominee. Are you expecting Muslim Americans to vote for former President Trump in large numbers, even though he has promoted policies that you have said yourself are Islamophobic, and also called for an outright Muslim ban?
Absolutely not. The Abandoned Biden movement is very particular about that. We are not voting for President Trump. We are going to vote for a candidate that is yet to be determined. That process is ongoing right now. The Muslim American voters are not abandoning also the polling stations and the election. We are going to vote. But the challenge we are having right now is, first of all, it is a foregone conclusion. The American Muslim vote has moved and shifted. We just are now organizing to shift into the independent space or another candidate. And this is something that for many pundits and folks who may not know our community that well are pontificating without really understanding how much this has been conclusion. From what we have heard,
You're actively looking for a third-party candidate to
yes.
endorse.
Yes, and that process is ongoing right now. And as a community, we will make a determination on who that candidate will be.
And a third-party candidacy could deliver the election to former President Trump.
And that is a sacrifice that many Muslims are willing to make.
Wow.
And because we understand that the Democratic Party, which many of us have been part of, many of us have supported, are no longer the party that we have been supporting. And this president has modeled that this party and this leadership at the top do not recognize, do not value, and do not recognize international human rights laws. The United States right now is an embarrassment to the world. Over a majority of the UN have come forward to call for a ceasefire every week, and the United States continues to veto. While we are seeing, it's not that we don't know, we are seeing countless and countless of thousands of children being murdered through this campaign. And so we American Muslims, we don't want to be part of that. We also don't want to be part of re-electing former President Donald Trump. But we understand that if we make this decision, there are consequences. But in the long term, I do believe that this decision will make the Democratic Party better. And we are also optimistic that the Republican Party as well will be better. And we are not calling for just Muslims. We're calling for Republicans, and Democrats to join us in abandoning those who are choosing the side of death and not be the side of life. And we don't want this nation to go into another war. We have seen for the decades in the past Middle East wars that have never resolved.
And Jaylani, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off there because we are out of time, but I appreciate your making your points, which are crystal clear, the points that you are making, and obviously they will have very great consequences for our election next year. Thank you so much for explaining this.
Thank you for having me.
Joining us right now is Steve Hunegs. He is the executive director of the JCRC for Minnesota and the Dakotas. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Esme. I always appreciate being on your show and participating in your reporting.
Thank you. What do you think, what is the political impact as we head into an election year of this terrible situation? I think everybody agrees that began on October 7th with the attacks on the Israeli settlements.
Well, I think politics in the broadest sense, or politically speaking, in the broadest sense, it's energized the American Jewish community. You can see it in something as local as our Hanukkah party. We had attendance last night that was far beyond anything that we'd seen in the past. 300 people came to our Hanukkah party, elected officials. It represents people wanting to gather. And B, many friends and elected officials believing it was important to come, where a large number of people from the Jewish community were attending. But we're seeing this sort of activism at many different levels. When we had the solidarity gathering at Bethel Synagogue in the immediate aftermath of the terrorist attacks, Governor Walz and Senator Klobuchar spoke. We had 2,000 people, and hundreds of people were turned away who could not come. I can tell you at other JCRC events and other JCRC programs, very large numbers of people. Had hundreds of thousands of people go to DC for the Solidarity March in Washington. We had 185 people from the Twin Cities sell out a plane, a charter, and almost instantaneously to participate. So there's great energy in support of Israel, and often with the American Jewish community, it will translate into people voting, people participating in campaigns and the like. Our community engages in politics, again, as a whole, even in the absence of crisis, at a Middle East crisis, at a terrorist attack on Israel, and people are motivated.
Wow, okay. In terms of what you're seeing about the support for President Biden, I understand that there have been polls just within the Jewish community asking about if they support how President Biden is handling this situation.
November polling showed more than 70% of American Jews approved of the way President Biden was handling the war. Now, there's been some time that has passed, but that's the most recent polling that I've seen. It roughly correlates with the American Jewish voting patterns in presidential elections. Usually between about 70 and 80% of American Jews vote the Democratic ticket. Biden may have been up as close to 75 or even somewhere between 70 and 80 in the 2020 election. So you're seeing two things, perhaps, and of course I'll defer to political science experts on these matters, that support for the president and his Middle East policies probably breaks down roughly along Jewish voting lines in terms of who people vote for in the presidential elections. And two, I think also the American Jewish tradition of deferring to the executive, particularly the president when it comes to matters of foreign policy. I think the broader picture too is concern for our overall American democracy. When people start even tolerating, even willing to consider the use of political violence or violence to advance political causes, it's hugely corrosive of democracy. And the things that we see now, post October 7, and threats against people and people showing up outside an Israeli restaurant in Philadelphia to protest, or attacks on Jews in the streets in large American cities, tells you that we're no longer dealing with the political realm, but we're dealing with violence and intimidation too.
Well, I know this is a very, very painful time. I appreciate your input. Thank you so much, Steve, for joining us.
Thanks, Esme. Take care.
Up next, hear from two longtime party insiders on what they think the fallout will be. Joining us right now, Amy Koch, Republican analyst. Your thoughts about the impact of this war on the election coming up in 2024?
Yeah, I think that I don't want to say surprised. Obviously, this is a significant, impactful, horrible event that's happening with one of our strongest allies overseas, Israel. But the politics surrounding this have been so unique, and really feels different. Because I think in the past there's just been like a real, whether you're Republican or Democrat, standing with Israel is just what we do as Americans. But there's been a much more vocal contingent across the country, here in Minnesota and across the country, from with the sort of the Palestinian side, and not just vocal. I mean, protests everywhere, really strong words, sometimes shockingly surprising and words, frankly, but the political possibilities have never been this strong, particularly for Democrats, because obviously
the risk or the benefit?
The risk to Democrats. It's almost they're damned if they do and they're danged if they don't, because like for President Biden, he's been very strong in his support of Israel. He's been really unflinching in that, but that is stirring up a lot of folks that would be traditional Democrat voters saying, we no longer support Joe Biden. We're looking at other options. We're searching for other candidates. Do I think they vote for President Trump? No, I don't think they do. But do they stay home or vote third party? Yes. And that could have significant impact on the presidential race.
And do you think it could have a potential impact further down the ballot on Democratic candidates?
100%. That's the other piece of this, right? So 2016, President Trump didn't really win the election. Hillary lost the election. What I mean by that is, President Trump's numbers weren't that much higher. He lost by 1% in Minnesota, but his numbers weren't that much better than Mitt Romney. Hillary Clinton underperformed President Biden or President Obama by a significant amount, right, because a lot of people just stayed home.
And so be the threat here.
That is the threat here. And what that also had, though, in 2016, tremendous down ballot help for the Republicans. Republicans swept in everywhere down ballot because of the win by President Trump, or the sort of the voters staying home. And that had down ballot implications for the good for Republicans.
All right. Well, Senator Amy Koch, thank you so much. We really appreciate your input.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Well, joining us right now is Democratic political analyst Abu Amara. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Esma.
All right. What do you think the political fallout is going to be, or is right now, on the Democrats over this Israeli-Hamas conflict?
Well, there's no question there are high tensions on both sides. It is a friendly fight within the Democratic Party. Luckily,
is it really that friendly, though, Abu?
No, it is real. I want to be clear. There are real significant disagreements in the party. But this is not a new disagreement within the Democratic Party. This goes back decades and decades. And so we're going to have to come to a consensus, agree to disagree about how to move forward, but what it means electorally for Joe Biden is. And this is what I would say to folks who think he's doing the wrong thing. Ultimately, your choice is going to be Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And that should clear minds up as we head into the November 2024 election, because if you disagree with Joe Biden on what he's doing now, imagine what Donald Trump would do if he were in office again.
All right. But won't this, looking at the polls and how well Donald Trump is doing, people do not seem to be bothered by his past indiscretions, whatever you want to call it. Aren't Democrats, shouldn't they be really worried that you've got efforts like this Dump Biden movement by Palestinian groups in a number of key states? All you need is people to not be energized to vote. And that could cost the Democrats.
Yeah, there's no question it is a political threat. And I think that the Biden administration and others need to directly engage with communities in Michigan in Minnesota and across the country, and to really have real dialogue to say, I understand you might disagree with me on this issue, but we've got to look at the big picture here. This is a legitimate issue that we have to deal with. You may not agree with me on everything, but we have to stay unified, because if we don't, ultimately, that might be the reason, if enough folks don't turn out, that Donald Trump is reelected.
So you think in the end, if it comes down to President Biden versus former President Trump, the choice will be so obvious people will just vote for President Biden? What if it's Nikki Haley? I mean, what if it is a different Republican? Because that's still very much a possibility. The polls don't look that way, but it could happen.
Well, yeah, pie in the sky. I mean, what could happen here? What could happen there? There could be different candidates. I'm basing it off of the data we have today. If it's Nikki Haley moving forward, I think it's an entirely different race for Joe Biden. I think Joe Biden leans more into abortion and choice issues to really draw that contrast with Nikki Haley. So I think if it's Trump and Biden, this issue could make a real impact in terms of turnout for Biden. So he has to be conscious of that, and he has to make sure that as we get closer to election day, he's reaching out to the Arab American community to make sure that they understand, even if you disagree with them on this issue, that he is a better alternative than Donald Trump.
All right. Thank you so much, Abu Amara. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
And that does it for this edition of Talking Points. As always, please email me with comments and suggestions at esme@wcco.com. The show streams every Wednesday and Thursday night at 6:30 and 9:30 on CBS News Minnesota. On Friday evening, the show will be posted to WCCO's YouTube channel, so you can watch on demand. Thank you for watching. I'm Esme Murphy, WCCO News.